Hi everyone, welcome to the CZ Armor channel. So the video today is going to be about something that I basically owe you. I put videos together on how to do a complete disassemble of the Shadow 2 frame and slide, and as you can see in the comments of those videos, I simply overlooked the fact that I did not put a video together on how to reassemble the gun. So hopefully there is nobody there that took everything apart following the instructions on my video, but now it's stuck trying to put everything back together because I didn't put a video together on that. There are other videos out there on how to assemble the gun, so this is not going to be unique. This is not going to be the only resource out there for you to do that, but hopefully it's going to be a good one. So let's put this together. So this is going to be the reassemble of the frame. I do have a disassemble slide, but I'm not going to put it together right now. So this is just the frame, and what I'm going to do here first and actually show you each one of the parts that are taken out of the frame, and that we're going to put it back. And while I'm showing you, I'm going to move them aside because I'm going to need this area to work in the gun. And I'm going to after that, I'm going to talk about the tools that you're going to need. Right, so starting with the smaller parts first, you got the sear cage or ejector. This is completely disassembled. You have other parts here that are part of it. The sear itself, if you have OEM sear, it's going to look slightly different than this. This is an aftermarket sear, but the way to assemble, the way to put back together is the same. You got a sear pin. This is what puts the sear spring all together with the sear cage. You got a spacer. You're not going to have this spacer if you're using the OEM sear. This is just for the aftermarket sear. And the sear spring. So that's what you got in terms of sear cage. Next we have safeties. So safety on the right side is just a flat one. Safety on the left side, that's also flat safety, but has the rod that goes through the frame and through the sear cage and keeps everything in place. Then you have a detent. This one with the spring is a detent to the left side. And this one without the spring is a detent on the right side of the safety. Those detents keep the safety in place. Little spring here. It looks more like a piece of like a little iron rod here. This is your slide stop spring, and it stays on the frame locked in place by this little pin, more like a pivot. Put this aside. Then we have mag release spring. That's probably one of the most annoying parts to put it back in the gun. Hopefully won't give us too much work. The slide release button itself, I did not take it apart, but basically this is a one T15 or T10 torque screw that you remove and the button comes off. There's no spring or anything here. Then we have the grips. These are aftermarket grips, but they go in place the same way as the OEM ones, no difference. A trigger, also an aftermarket trigger, but goes together with the trigger bar and trigger spring, exactly the same way. So, and there's a little pin here. So in my hand here, I got the trigger bar assembly complete with trigger spring, pin, and trigger bar. Put them on the side here. A trigger, well, this is the trigger pin that keeps the trigger attached to the trigger bar, the small one here. And there's a larger one that is the trigger pin that then gets the pin attached to the frame. Not the pin, sorry, the trigger attached to the frame. We have a trigger bar spring. The trigger bar spring goes overlap with the trigger or the magazine release spring, and it's fixed in the frame, fixed into the frame by this little flat screw. And finally, the rest of it, you got the hammer, disconnector, and hammer strut. I did not take them apart for this one. This gun was just a gun that I'm doing like a factory clean and put it back together, so there was no reason for me to disassemble this. But basically, it's just two pins. You remove these pins, use a 1/16 punch, and they are originally staked pins. You need to maybe use one of those starter punch to get them moving, but they move pretty easily, and you can remove the pins, and then the disconnector and the hammer strut come apart. To put them together is the same thing, just align the pins back and hammer it, strike them down. Hammer pin, that's what keeps the pin attached to the frame. Little pin with a flange on one side and flat on the other. A tiny pin is probably the smallest pin of the gun. Well, actually, well, let me see. I'm curious about this. What is the smallest pin in this gun? Is that the slide spring? No, it's not the slide stop spring. It is really this hammer pin counter pin. This is like goes into perpendicular to the hammer pin, so it doesn't let the hammer pin slide to the left side. Mainspring or hammer spring, mainspring cup. This keeps the mainspring in place in the frame. Then we have a couple pins. This pin, larger, is the one that keeps the mainspring cup in place. And then we have, last but not least, the mag brake and the pin that keeps the mag brake in place. All right, let's talk about tools and what you're going to need to put this together. All right, I'll try to go by memory here. You're going to need a 1/16 punch. You're going to need a 3/32nd, 3/32nd punch, a tweezer or a nose plier, a hammer, a little gunsmith hammer. One of these is recommended. It's kind of a forceps, I think, or hammerstack. I think that's how it's called. It's a tweezer that locks in the back, and that's just for the trigger return spring, so it doesn't fly. You might want to use one of these. Well, a nose plier. Might need this, and a flat screw. I think this is like a flat screwdriver. What's the size of this thing? 1/4 inch, I think. Yeah, about 1/4 inch flat screwdriver. That's all we're gonna need. Oh, and of course for the grip panels, you're going to need a T20 Torx screwdriver. Yeah. If you have Torx screws, if you have Phillips screws, then obviously you need a Phillips screwdriver. In terms of tools, I think this is all you're gonna need a block to, a gunsmith block. In this case, I use a 2x4, piece of 2x4 with some holes, strategically positioned for me to remove some parts and work best with the guns. All right, this is it in terms of tools. Let's get it now and get to work and put this together. Okay, the first thing I'm gonna do, first part I'm gonna put together is the slide stop spring. And it goes as this spring with this little pin that I showed you before. And the way it works is it goes, this curved in the spring, this curved up, goes into a little tiny hole here in the slide. If I can show you, the camera is going to catch this. There's a little hole right here. I'm not sure if this is if the camera is going to catch, but it's on the right side of the slide. You're going to see a little hole on the inside, and there is a hole up front to it, forward to it, right here on the outside. So these are the two holes we're going to use. The one inside, this curve on the spring, this curve at the top, it's going to go in that little hole, and then once it's in, you can see here, I can push this, make it lay down perfectly in that slot, in the slot that exists in the slide to accommodate the slide stop spring. So that goes in. Now I get the pin put in that hole outside, and I'm gonna use, I think I failed to mention this too, like a small, really small flat screwdriver. I want to push this spring downwards while I'm pushing the pin to the left. Might need to do a little tap with the hammer. Let me see. And it's kind of you can't really push too much. See if this works. All right, there we go. This is the pin holding the spring. The spring is in place, locked in that slot, as you can see here. Perfect. Okay, next is something that is a little bit annoying to put back together, is the mag release button spring. So this goes here in the frame. There's my pick that I was using to show you stuff inside. There we go. This area here, see this hole? that's where the flat screw is going to go in and lock it in place, but the spring goes like that curve of the spring goes up here, and the two legs of the spring go down into a channel, compressed into a channel, to this channel here, all the way down, and it will be locked by these two slots in the each leg in one slot, in the mag release button that goes perpendicular to it. So I won't master the mag release button right now. The most annoying part is to actually get the spring there. So what I'm going to do here, the way I learned how to put this is get this out, get the spring from the top, go in here in the slot, and you're going to use a flat screwdriver to, you put one spring in this slot there in that channel, and use a flat screwdriver to push the other in while you're compressing the whole thing with your thumb. You have to be careful. This is an operation here that this thing can fly away sometimes. So if you're not really confident on it, there we go, that's in. You should maybe do this inside a big Ziploc bag or something, so it flies inside the bag. It's not going to go anywhere. But it's supposed to be, I'm not going to take my thumb out because I don't want this to fly. It's supposed to be like you see right now here. Once that's in place, now I got the magazine release button. Got it in there. Okay, the spring is down too much. So when there's no supply here, push it up a little bit so it opens space for the magazine release button to go in. There we go. Okay, once this is in, I have to push it down again. And then it's a matter of those legs to align with the slots in the mag release button. So what we want to do here is make sure that we position the mag release button in place, and there we go. So actually this was easier than normal. Normally it takes longer for me to put this together. All right, once that's in place, you want the trigger bar spring, this weird shaped spring here. It goes like this with this two legs upwards, and it goes in here, and this round area here is going to overlap with that round area of the magazine release spring, and will be all locked in place by that flat screwdriver. Flat screw, this one here. So let's put this back there. Get a tweezer, put it in place, squeeze it with my hand so it goes in the frame. And once it's in, make it align like so. So it should be like this. You can see both springs are overlapping on that round area. And now the screw is going to go on top and lock everything in place. So I got my screwdriver. Oops, don't drop the screw. Maybe I got a tweezer and get that screw in place first. Then I get the screwdriver. And I'm just going to go in. Notice I'm not using Loctite of any type here. This screw already has some Loctite from from factory. It's very dangerous to use if you use the wrong Loctite or too much Loctite here, or somehow this screw gets locked in the frame. It's a nightmare to remove. It goes in an angle that's not even 90 degrees with the frame, so it's really difficult to remove once it's stripped or anything. So just make sure you don't over tight this screw, and don't use any kind of a Loctite that it's too hard. Maybe some blue Loctite, not too much, not an excessive amount. And I'm gonna go just like, not really a lot of torque on this, just to make sure it's tight. That's all. If you make it too tight, you're gonna put a lot of pressure on the trigger bar spring as well, and your trigger won't feel good. So just note that. All right, so that's like it goes. See the flat screw there, both springs held in place, perfect. Next, I'm gonna put the trigger assembly. So trigger bar, trigger pin, spring, everything. So first thing I'm gonna do is get my trigger shoe. I get my trigger return spring. and I'm going to use a little trick here with the slave pin to put that trigger return spring in place before I put in the gun. A lot of people said in the comments when I was disassembly, or I think I have a video on just working on this spring, that oh, they make it much easier just to use a nose plier. Perfect. Do whatever works for you. The way I'm used to, and what works best for me, is I just go here, put the trigger back in the trigger bar. So trigger bar like this. The hole in the trigger shoe, the lower hole is where the trigger bar goes in. The upper hole is where the trigger pin goes in to get everything locked to the frame. So I'm gonna line these holes here real quick. Get my trigger pin, perfect. This is how it should look. And then I'm gonna get a slave pin. Forgot to mention this is a tool you're gonna need, right? So, but it can be like a piece of toothpick. Anything that fits perfectly inside this gap between these two holes in the trigger shoe will work. So I'm gonna get the spring. The spring goes longer leg outside, shorter leg inside. So what I mean by outside inside is like this. Longer leg goes outside the trigger, shorter leg goes inside the trigger shoe. And I'm gonna use my fingers here just to kind of position that spring, press that spring in until it is like the spring hole and this holes in the trigger shoe are aligned, like so. And I'm gonna get the slave pin, put it in there to keep this spring in place. All right, that's the spring is there, and the slave pin is in place. I need the slave pin to be more. It's not 100% where I need, so I'll make sure it fits in. There you go. Flush in both sides of the trigger. So the trigger is going to go in really easy. I'm going to take advantage that this is all out to put some lubrication here, a little bit of oil, just a tiny bit here on each side of the trigger bar. Maybe here under the disconnector rubs into it. Maybe here as the slides rides into it, and underneath on the where the trigger bar spring rides on it. So it's just a film of oil, not really a lot, and it just goes in here. I'm gonna position the trigger bar like this with the trigger and everything. You can already see the trigger in the side. Now I need to use my fingers. It's hard to show on camera, but use your fingers here to push the trigger bar down. One thing that might help is actually get your safety on the right side in, because the trigger bar rides underneath that safety, and it's gonna help getting the trigger in the right position that you need to push that slave pin out. So you're gonna use your fingers to align the hole in the frame with the holes, with that hole that the slave pin is through. So you push it there until you align that. You're gonna see here against the light. And once you see it, you can get your trigger pin and just get your trigger. This is a floating pin, but it's still a trigger pin. It goes like so. Pushing, and then, whoops, nope, not really aligned yet. When it's aligned, you're gonna go one strike and it goes in. So it's slippery in my hand here, and I'm not really seeing against the light. Okay, I can see it now. This tree is so polished that it is slipping. I can't hold it. So let me do this. I'm gonna play safe here. I'm gonna do one additional step. I'm gonna lock my trigger turn spring in place here so this doesn't fly, because I'm having trouble aligning this and keep it aligned. I'm gonna go down here, get a 1/16 punch, long one, and what I'm gonna do is align it again. I'm gonna use the punch instead of the pin first. Then I replace the punch with the pin. Make sure that the spring is in the slot as it's supposed to be. That's not working. All right, I replaced my slave pin with the punch just to make it it's one more step, but it does work for what I want here. Now I use my block. Block has a hole. Told you about the strategic position holes. The punch goes through the hole. I'm gonna go here, the edge of the table, and all I have to do is push this punch out until I have a little bit of the edge of the hole there where I can put the trigger pin in, the floating pin in, and make sure that it's pushing, and then I use the hammer and I can take the punch out. I can release the spring. The spring is locked in place now by the pin, and everything is good. Pin is still out too much. I can just get my punch here and just push it down a little bit until it is flush. Perfect. Is the trigger working? Yep. Trigger is working perfectly fine. Go back here. Got my punch in place. All right, next we're gonna reassemble the sear cage and then put the sear cage. Well, actually, we're gonna reassemble the sear cage, but we're gonna put the hammer first, and then let me get the hammer now because the hammer is really easy to put it back. Just get the hammer strut, go back here like this, then align the holes of the hammer. This hole here in the hammer with the hole in the slide. Get them aligned, and get your that hammer pin, the one that has a flange. So the flat side goes from the left of the gun to the right. So in this case, up to down here, and then it's on, it's in. Make sure there's no friction or anything here. All good. Now, the last part here on the hammer is that counter pin. The counter pin, I'm gonna use my tweezer. So counter pin is this little tiny pin that I showed you before, and it goes right here. There's a hole right here where I'm punching that goes, that pin is going to go in the down direction here against making a perpendicular pin against that flange pin that went in to keep the hammer in place. So piece of cake, just get it in. It needs to go now. You cannot put the detent before you put that, because once the detent goes in, this pin is not going to be able to go in anymore. The detent is actually what keeps this pin in place, the safety detent. So pin is in. You can see now there is a counter pin here, right? That prevents that pin to go out. And next, we're going to get the sear cage assembled and put in place along with the safety. So next, we're going to put the sear cage together. You're going to need the sear cage itself, the sear. In this case, I have a spacer. So that's the difference between the OEM sear and the aftermarket sear. You can see they're both very similar. This is the OEM one. This is the aftermarket one. On top, you can see better. The aftermarket is kind of a narrower. So it's not as wide as this. This is the OEM. This is the aftermarket. The aftermarket is kind of a narrower than the OEM. The reason being, when it goes here in the sear cage, it leaves this gap. It leaves this gap that you can see here. This gap, the OEM would not leave this gap out. It would fill the whole space. The reason this gap is there is because they do this aftermarket sear for the CZ75 and Shadow 2. So it's like the CZ75, the SPO1, they have the firing pin block, and having the firing pin block, you need that space between the sear and the sear cage to have the lifter arm of the firing pin block and the spring. So for the Shadow, you don't need that. So in the Shadow, since there is no lifter arm, it creates that gap. And for this, they ship this little spacer to cover that gap. In my experience, this is more aesthetic than anything else. Like, it doesn't cause any malfunction if you don't have the spacer there. Your sear is not going to move anywhere, even though it's narrower. It's not going to move because it's locked in place by the spring. So, but it comes with it. We're going to put it back. So sear and sear cage, you can see that your ejector. This is kind of a good thing to give you direction of what everything else is going to go in. So your sear is going to go in with this longer leg here that you can see. In the aftermarket one, have a set screw in it. The OEM one doesn't have that. As you can see here, it's just a longer leg, right? This is where your safety is going to slide underneath to stop the sear from moving when the hammer is cocked. So it goes forward, aligned with the direction of the ejector. So this goes forward, and I'm going to put from underneath, like so. Then you get your spacer here with there in that gap, and you have to make sure everything is aligned with the hole in the sear cage. So what I'm going to do is use a 3/32 punch to go through everything and keep everything in place. So like this punch is simulating my sear pin, right? So of course I'm missing the spring. So what I'm going to do with the spring is put it on top, let it rest like this. Again, the spring has a longer leg and a shorter leg. You want the longer leg to be in the same direction as the ejector and the longer leg of the sear, and the shorter leg is going to be pointing backwards. So I'm just gonna, the trick here is I'm gonna put the spring there, let it rest, as you can see here, and I'm gonna use my left thumb. I'm right-handed, so I'm gonna use the left thumb to press it down, and I'm gonna push the punch, pull the punch out until it actually lets the spring slide in, and then push it back in, like this. So it is now, everything is locked in place. I can verify that the sear is, there's tension on the sear, it's working fine. Last thing I want to do is get my sear pin. I'm going to put a little drop of oil here at the end, just a little bit, really. So I got this whole thing, when it goes down, lubricate the whole channel there. And what I'm going to do is pull the punch out until there is enough space there, enough headspace there for the pin to go in, and put the pin in and start pushing the punch out with the pin. So as the pin goes in, it will push the punch out. Don't force it. I mean, if your pin is not pushing the punch out, this is not going to work. You can't really hammer yet. So right now it feels like it's already pushing the punch. So I can use the hammer to just do the last touch there, and there you go. Punch is out, pin is in, and my sear cage is assembled. Verify that it's functional, that it's working. It should be. You should have tension here as you press this leg down. You should have tension like you see here. And all looks good. I'm going to put a little bit, tiny little bit of oil in this area here. This is where it grabs against, it rides against the disconnector, and this is against the trigger bar. So a little bit of oil. There's even too much here. There you go. And next thing, what I'm going to do here is the detents. The safety in the detents. So I already got the safety on the right side as I was putting the trigger bar in. I'm gonna get the detent on the right side, put it in. There you go. And I'm gonna get the detent on the left side and put it in. That's the one with the spring, right? That goes on the left side here. The way I put this is I put it in place. The spring goes in that little channel that you can see there. You can't really see it. Let me see if I can show you in the camera here real quick. The left side, or the right side is already there. As you can see, it's right here. The left side goes here, in this channel here. So the spring and everything goes on that side, and then that little notch of the detent protrudes out of the hole that will kind of be clipping your safety to do that click up and down. This is what this does. This does not actually, different than what some people think. This is not what keeps the, I'm gonna put a little bit of oil here. It's not what keeps the sear in place. What keeps the sear in place, not the sear, sorry, the safety. What keeps the safety in place is your sear spring. So I'm gonna put that in place, get the spring slightly compressed, put the little flat screwdriver here, and then once it's in, I'm going to use my tweezer to push it back against the spring until it locks into that slot for the safety. That's perfectly in. So look at that, my detent on the right side moved out. So a little bit of oil is good, and it's not just, it doesn't require any lubrication in that area, but the oil will keep it in place. So it won't be moving as much as it's doing right now. Some people like to use grease. I don't like to use grease on guns, but tell me in the comments what do you think about this. So now the sear cage goes in. Sear cage going in, it goes here. Like, put the hammer, make sure your hammer is forward so the disconnector is down. Sear cage goes on top, and there is a right position here that you're going to hold with the thumb that you can tell the hole of the frame is aligned with the hole that you have in your sear cage. And that's when your safety from the left side, the one that has a long rod here, goes in across everything. I'm going to again use a little bit of oil here in that area at the end of the safety here, just to make sure that whole channel is lubricated. It goes in like this through the rear cage, through the sear cage, and I have to stop. The reason I have to stop is because my sear spring is stopping it from moving. You can see here that the sear spring is stopping that rod to continue going across. So what I need to do is use a small flat screw to remove the sear spring up while I'm pushing the safety in. So I'm gonna get that up, in, perfect. Now get back in place, push with your thumb, and goes there. Align the two safeties, and the two safeties should be moving together. That means they're clipped to each other, right? They're attached to each other. Good. Don't force it, because now what you have to do now is when the detent is in your way. You're gonna use that flat screwdriver to move the detent back against the spring, and then push the safety in at the same time. So you should hit a click. Perfect. And then make sure your sear spring is in this notch, in the notch that needs to be of the safety. This is right here, supposed to have a notch in the safety that the sear spring is gonna slide in and fix the safety in place. Now your safety is immovable. It's not gonna go anywhere. Trigger looks like it's working fine. Test function, everything looks good, feels good. Okay, next is gonna be the mainspring. Right, mainspring will be held in place by the mainspring cup with a perpendicular pin. I'm gonna get the mainspring in through the hammer strut here. Get that cup from the bottom of the gun like this. This slot needs to be aligned forward, perfectly forward. If there is any angle, you're not gonna be able to put to get your the spring cup pin in. So make sure this is moving forward, aligned with the gun, aligned with the frame. Press with your thumb, get the pin from the top, and it goes in. Perfect. Test function. It's working fine. Do not cock your gun here and pull the trigger and let the hammer fall, because the hammer, without the frame, without the slide, the hammer is going to be hitting the back of your ejector here, the back of your sear cage, and that's not designed to take the impact of the hammer. So you might run out of luck and just break your sear cage if you do that. So don't ever pull the trigger. If you have to work with the hammer cocked like this on the frame, I always advise you to put the safety up, because then it will prevent the trigger, to be pulled and the hammer to fall. If the safety's down, get the hammer down, so you prevent breaking your sear cage. Last thing we're going to do here in this area is the trigger brake, mag brake, sorry. Mag brake goes in this area here, meets this slot that you have here. And this little area that is narrow in the center needs to also coincide with this larger area where the holes for the grip screws go in. So get that in there. Everything is aligned here. Use your fingers, push it back, make sure the hole at the top is aligned with the hole in the frame, and you got that thinner pin that goes through. And this looks all good. Last thing here is going to be the grips, and we're good to go. All right, got the grips. Grip panel on the left side goes in. Torx T20, I believe this is. Yeah, T20 goes in that bolt, that screw in. Next, grip panel on the other side. This goes in. And we're good to go. If you want to see it complete, and get the slide. That's the slide. I'm gonna get my barrel. I'm gonna put some lubrication here real quick. So I like to lubricate the end of the barrel here where it goes against the bushing and the chamber, the locking lugs here. I don't normally put a lot of oil in the slide. Put it in. That's a tight bushing. Is an aftermarket bushing as well. I got the guiding rod, trigger, recoil spring goes in, and my slide is reassembled. So here's how I like to lubricate the slide. I'm going to put drops of oil here on the frame, on the where the slide rides on the frame. Just a generous amount of oil here. Don't be shy. That's where you can lubricate your steel frame gun. And I like to put the, well, it's not droppable, but the hammer rides on the slide. And I'm gonna rack a few times. Now if I take this out, if I take this slide out, it's everything lubricated in the slide where it needs to be. So I don't need to put oil in the slide itself. I just put the frame and rack it a few times, and that lubricates the whole thing. To put this up, I'm gonna get my slide lock. That's it. It's assembled. Thank you.